All right. Well, good morning, Rotary District 7770. My name is Donald Hovis with the Chicora Rotary Club here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And welcome to Conversations with Rotary Action People for Wednesday, May 27th. Hope everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend and enjoyed their holiday on Monday. Our topic today is Paul Harris, the man behind the fellowship. Joining us today, the man, the myth, the legend, Paul Harris. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today.
We are honored that you have time to be with our wonderful district here in South Carolina today.
I have all the time in the world.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure you know that our Rotary district is one of the most prosperous Rotary districts in the whole Rotary world. So thank you for your time again, sir.
That's why I agreed to be here.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to kick it off with the vision statement of Rotary. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. I want to introduce a few key people on the line today and on the Zoom call. Thank you for that comment. Before I do that, please go to the chat box, tell us your Rotary Club and where you're watching from today. Please put that in the chat box. If you may have done that earlier, this is a new deal here, so please post that in the chat box. All right, on the line, Paul, just so you know, we do have some dignitaries in our district here. Past district governor from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island and recent winner of a polio award from Rotary International, Mr. Bernie Rydell. Good morning, Bernie. Also, past district governor from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island, Mr. David Terrard and his wife, Susan. Good morning, guys. Past district governor, I believe from the Lake Murray Irmo Rotary Club in Columbia, South Carolina, Mr. Rod Funderburk. Good morning, Rod. I hope I got that right. Let's see, who else here? District Governor-elect from the Rotary Club of Myrtle Beach, Miss Pauline Levesque. Good morning, Pauline. District Governor-elect nominee from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island, Mr. Paul Walter. Good morning, Paul. Let's see. Public Image Chair for our Rotary District, Miss Mary Gask. Good morning, Mary. Our District Communications Chair from the Rotary Club of Somerville Evening in Somerville, South Carolina, Mr. Terry Moore. Good morning, Terry. And then also, I cannot remember his title, but he does hold a leadership position within our district, I believe from the Rotary Club of Georgetown in Georgetown, South Carolina, Mr. George Chastain. So good morning, George. Hope I did not miss anybody. If I did, I'm sorry. Paul, thank you again for being here. It's all about you now.
Well, this is fantastic. Boy, I don't understand this Zoom stuff. What you're doing is just a mystery to me. Zoom was something that we might do in a Model A Ford going 45 miles down the highway. But congratulations to what you're doing, however you're doing it.
Well, I appreciate that very much. So can you tell us about the beginnings of Rotary and how did it all start?
Well, the beginnings of Rotary were very simple. There was a desire on my part to recreate the kind of fellowship and the spirit of hospitality that I had experienced growing up with my grandparents in New England. And I wanted to reestablish as best I could that kind of faith in one's fellow human beings and share it with others. And it started out with Hiram, Gus, Sylvester, and I simply getting together for meetings with one another. try to develop our friendships. We were all working in the big city of Chicago, and for a way to create a little respite in the middle of our work days, we would meet in one another's offices, and we would meet every 2 weeks, and we had a regular rotation going from one office to another, and that's where the name Rotary came about. And before too long, other people wanted to join. Our little club was too big to meet in offices anymore, and so we moved into a restaurant with all the benefits that good food and drink could provide. And from then on, Rotary just took off and grew as we found that so many other people, just like we did, desired to create more fellowship with their fellow residents in cities and even in small towns and rural places throughout the country and soon throughout the world.
Looking back over the history of Rotary, what are you most proud of?
Boy, that's such a difficult thing to remark upon because, of course, Rotary has accomplished so much more than I had ever envisioned. I find it so remarkable, the efforts of Rotarians working across the world to eliminate polio. That is just something that was unimaginable to anybody in my day, that you would come so close now to eliminating that horrible scourge from our planet. And then the incredible efforts you've made in so many areas to improve water, such a basic necessity, not only for the health of people all over the world, but for the well-being of communities. But I guess the thing I'm most proud of is the way in which Rotary continues to nourish and develop youth, from the Rotary Youth Exchange to the clubs involving Rotaractors and Interactors. One of the things I've always said is that mighty oaks from little seeds will grow. And we see this over and over, that Rotary continues to encourage our young people. And that is something that I always would happen. I always tried to encourage, and I see that you are still doing it. And that makes me so proud.
What does the Rotary of today have in common with the Rotary of your day?
Well, there's so many things are different. Even in a format like this, just unimaginable. So much about the world today is unimaginable from the time in which I lived. And yet, I think the heart of Rotary continues to be the same. The 5 core values of Rotary: fellowship, leadership, integrity, diversity, and service. We find those being carried out. They're embodied in the practices of every club and every district around the world. I mentioned the desire for fellowship that I had at the very beginning, and I see that continued in every club, that what we do is we try to build upon fellowship. First of all, we form friends with one another. And out of that friendship that we develop, we find opportunities for service. The emphasis on leadership is just so key. We provide opportunities for people that are maybe leaders in their own business life, in their careers or professions, but we provide people from many different professions and many different walks of life opportunities to be leaders in their communities. This is something that just is at the very heart of Rotary, as well as the mentoring of young people who are starting out in their careers and giving them opportunities to become leaders in projects, in running club meetings. And we find that they discover leadership potential in themselves that they had never recognized previously. And imagine all the benefits there are to our communities all over the world because of that. Integrity is certainly so key. Herb Taylor was one of the members of my club, Rotary 1 in Chicago. And when he devised the 4-way test for his company, Club Aluminum, it was really a way of trying to, for him to think through how he can be a person of integrity and how he can share that with everybody in his organization so that they could think through carefully any decision they were going to make so that they weren't simply reacting out of fear or out of desire or out of short-sightedness. And that four-way test being adopted by Rotary has been such a gift so that we can all bring not just the word integrity to our communities, we can bring a really substantial tool that helps people act as people of integrity within communities. Imagine what it's like when we have a very simple device like the four-way method to think to ourselves, is something true? Have we considered all sides of it? Are the people we're talking to are on the same page so that we have a common understanding of what the issue is? Is it fair to all concerned? That is the decision we're making, does it treat people with equality and respect? Are we taking care not to privilege our own position and put ourselves ahead of others? Building goodwill and better friendships. We can ask the question of, is the action we're about to do something that's going to build trust, or is it going to undermine trust and create suspicion? And finally, will it be beneficial to all concerned? That is the opportunity to take some time and think about how is everybody affected by the decision we're going to make? How does it seem from their point of view? Are they helped or hurt by the proposal under consideration? And so this opportunity to think through carefully what we're about to do so that we can act with strength and wholeness, which is what the word integrity originally means. This is another great gift that Rotary continues to provide to everyone around the world. Diversity, the fourth of these 5 core values that inform Rotary. We come from every race, creed, religion, all kinds of different ways of life and different interests, and yet what we find is something that reaches deep down into our common humanity. And how easy it is to practice diversity when I look into the eyes of a stranger, the first thing I see is a potential friend. And this is what Rotary brings to us. And then finally, service. We all believe in service above self. And think about your own community and wherever you happen to live, the opportunities for service that Rotary has provided, but then the great benefits, the different projects that you have done, the different ways in which people who have a heart of service can come together and build upon and strengthen one another. What a great every community. And so I just see that Rotary continues to provide these 5 core values regardless of the form in which we meet. And that's something that I'm certainly very proud of, and I see will continue as long as Rotary lasts.
What do you foresee for the future of Rotary?
That is a hard question to answer because, of course, none of us can foresee what will happen in the world. So many of the particular things that I would say are part of your daily lives are things that I could never have imagined. But what I'm confident is that the attitude of service above self will continue to inform Rotary, and that the fellowship, which is at the heart of Rotary, will continue to inform it. Near the end of my life, people would often ask how Rotary survived through all the challenges that we faced in the early days. And if you recall, if you know anything about those times, we not only had the Spanish flu and the huge disruption all over the world that caused, and certainly the disruption to our gatherings, and then followed by the Great War, and then the Great Depression, and then World War II. Rotary did not survive despite those challenges. Rotary survived because of them. All the great the great changes in our lives, which build us and strengthen us and make us more capable of responding to life's call, all happens during transitions in life. And Rotary is as a fellowship, is intended to bring people together to address the greatest needs that our communities have. And so it is precisely in times of great and great struggle that Rotary is most needed. And Rotary will continue to survive as long as we have the confidence that we are answering that call.
Now, Paul, I have received a few questions here from the viewers, and I'll ask you those at this time. How big was the first club, and what was the name? Is that club still in existence today?
Rotary 1 in Chicago, yes. But the very first club, as I mentioned, Hiram, Sylvester, Gus, and I, it was the four of us. And then we quickly grew from there, but it started with a small gathering.
When was the last time you visited that club? Had it grown very much?
Well, it had grown quite a bit, and I don't recall the numbers, but my wife and I settled there in Chicago, and so that was our lifelong club. There were many interruptions, of course, because we traveled all over the world, and we visited clubs all over the world. That was something that was a particular passion of ours, but we finally settled in Chicago and built a home, Cumley Bank, overlooking the natural area. And any, you know, these prairie areas that are throughout the greater Chicago area. This is where my wife and I met on a walk with some of these, one of these prairie walks that I had organized. And so that Rotary 1 became our lifelong club.
How formal were the meetings that you held, and how does that compare to the structure of our regular meetings today?
I lived at a time where there was much more formality in our daily practices. As you can see of the way I'm dressed, we dressed up like this for work every day. And it was actually a chore. This is something we did to be in public. We really took care of our appearance and the appearance of our organizations. The other thing that we thought was really important is ritual, because ritual gives people a common sense of purpose and meaning. However, I always encourage our clubs not to get too attached to any particular rituals or any particular precedent, because precedent is the great enemy of creativity. All progress is made by examining our precedent, keeping what is valuable, what works, and discarding what doesn't. And so in many ways, we were much more formal than your clubs are today. But I never encourage our clubs to get stuck in that formality. I always encourage our clubs to be exploring new ways of gathering, new ways of developing fellowship and making it meaningful.
How can we make Rotary more attractive to young professionals, and has Rotary always had older men?
Well, of course, when it started, it was younger to middle-aged men. And it was a men's group, of course, until 1987, when we made that ultimate step towards inclusiveness. And I look forward to the day when someday there will be a woman as president of Rotary International. But to answer your question, repeat that question, because I started thinking about the presence of men in the club, and I tell you what, This is just marvelous, but completely unexpected to see so many women on this call.
How do you think we can make Rotary more attractive to young professionals?
Yes. Well, the key is the innovation. One of the things that I encourage businesses to do is to always be looking at what they can do better. That is, hire a critic. Hire a critic that can come in and tell you, what are you not doing well, and then change it. I think any organization that is going to survive has to be very critical of itself. And this is something that if we're going to keep young people involved, it can't be something that those of us who've been members of Rotary a long time simply become comfortable with. We should always be looking at how are we engaging the next generation, what kinds of experiences are meaningful to them, and how we can bring them in. And so there's no way of doing that without asking them, where can you find opportunities to serve? How can we help you do that? If there's one thing I'm convinced of, it's that young people, especially starting out in their professions, have a great desire to be of use in their communities. And we have an obligation as established Rotarians of providing that pathway, of connecting their great desire to the great need in our communities. And if we are not doing that effectively, then we have to re-examine ourselves and saying, what are we doing wrong? Because that is the very purpose of Rotary.
Can you tell us a little bit about your personal and work life before coming to Chicago and being an attorney?
Well, I was a troublemaker all through school. Some of you may have read how many schools I was kicked out of. Some of those I was probably didn't deserve, but that's okay. There are plenty of other sanctions for things I never got caught doing. And I took some time out for 5 years after I graduated from college. I traveled the world. I served on a ship. I had a brief time as a cowboy. I did just about everything except fly an airplane. And those were 5 wonderful years. It was good at that time in my life to be a young man exploring the world and getting to know people. What I discovered is that there is great goodness in people in every walk of life. And I would say without that experience, those 5 years of meeting so many people in so many different kinds of occupations, that I would not have brought the same energy and kind of commitment to neighbor into the establishment of Rotary clubs.
What are your thoughts on dropping the importance of classifications?
Well, I don't have strong thoughts on that because I think it is something that you have to decide at the club level. Are the classifications something that help your club to deliver on its promise of service and on the experience of fellowship, or is it something that hinders it? And so this is something that you have to poll your members, and then I would say especially talk to your most recent members. What is their experience? Is this something that helps or hinders? And I've never been one to say, let's just stick with something because this is the way we've always done it. We have to always be looking at how we can do things better.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. I did want to mention now that Paul Harris actually is Richard Kite. And Richard Kite is joining us today from the Downtown Lacrosse Rotary Club in La Crosse, Wisconsin, member of District 6250. So thank you for being with us, Richard, and sharing this amazing story of our founder, Mr. Paul Harris. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's just a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I have a few questions just for you in terms of your career as a Rotarian to kind of wrap us up here today.
Sure.
How long have you been in Rotary?
I've been in Rotary for 18 years. Moved to La Crosse 20 years ago. It took 2 years of arm twisting to get me to agree to join the club. And I will admit freely, I spent the first 2 years really questioning whether it was worth my time. But after that period of getting to know people, I just found it one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done is saying yes to Rotary. And so I just fell in love with the organization, although it took me a while to do that.
And I'll give the credit to this next phrase to Susan Terrard from Hilton Head Island. But there's one time you can say no to Rotary, and that's when someone asks you to join.
That's right. Yeah, well, that's wonderful.
I love that phrase, and I use it all the time. But Susan, I think, told me that years ago. This question just came over from a viewer. However, you sent it over for me to ask you last night as well. So how did you get started doing Paul Harris?
One of my good friends in Rotary, and in fact, a past district governor here, Dean Dickinson, asked me if I would be Paul Harris for a centenary celebration we were having last year for our club. And Dean is one of those people that it's very hard to say no to. And so he not only asked me to do it, he had written up a script for me, and he said, just dress up like Paul Harris and memorize this little speech and go out there. And so it was a big surprise for our club, and I got out and well, what happened, it's not something I intended. I started to get invitations to do this at some other places. So like the spring at the PETS conference in Chicago, I was Paul Harris. And then I've been doing some of these Zoom meetings, and I'm getting more and more invitations, but it was certainly not something that I intended to do more than once.
Well, you've done a tremendous job, and that's how we found you, is we found you on another Zoom, and that's why you're with us here today.
Well, that's great.
Who do you think, or why do you think it is important to bring Paul Harris alive for today's Rotarians?
Well, this is something I've just discovered reading more about Paul Harris, reading some of his speeches and so forth. Just such an incredible person. And what I've been so impressed with is the emphasis on kindness. We're living at a time we've become so polarized in our society. And one way in which we get through this is not just to emphasize how bad it is to be polarized. What we do is we find what is our common heritage. What I sometimes teach in my classes, leadership classes, we have to find our deep story. And Paul Harris is part of the deep story of Rotary. And especially during times of great transition in society, and of course we're going through this now, you have to go back to the origins to find out what brought us all together in the first place, so that we can decide what do we keep and then move forward with again and do it together. And so I think Paul Harris is in some ways just a reminder of that deep story for all of us in Rotary.
As you look at Paul Harris's life, what are some of his qualities that you think it is important to pay attention to?
First of all, how much fun he had. Everything Paul Harris did, he was seeking to have fun. This was the source of his troublemaking and getting kicked out of school repeatedly. He was always up for fun, and that, we see that in Rotary. People get together and have a good time. They have fun. The other thing is this message of fellowship, that he really desired connection with others. And he thought that developing friendships was really the key to happiness. And he wanted to promote that and give more people opportunities to form friendships. So this idea of having fun, the idea of forming friendships, these are key to his character. His deep faith in him. I mean, imagine going through both World War I and World War II and continuing to find faith in bringing people together for international understanding. Because even people who've been at war with are filled with people of goodwill who need opportunities to come together and express that goodwill. This is just bedrock in Paul Harris. And then finally, his hope. He was always hopeful that if we provide opportunities for people to engage in fellowship, to practice kindness with one another, that the world will become more peaceful. And so I find that just an absolutely inspiring message from him.
Now I got a couple questions here and comments from our viewers. What is your current occupation?
I'm a professor of ethics and leadership. I teach at a small college, Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we have a center for ethics that I run. And then we also have a program, a master's program in servant leadership. And so I've been teaching in that program for 18 years now.
And this is a comment for you, Richard, from a viewer. Said it won't be long till we'll see you speaking at an international convention as Paul Harris.
Well, you know what? I would have said no way just a few months ago, but I'm starting to get a little more comfortable doing this. But I certainly have to read up a lot more about Paul Harris, and I've been trying to do that whenever I have some little bit of free time, and I'm finding it so rewarding. So I think, well, that would be wonderful. I think I would really enjoy it, and it's, as I've indicated to you, I think it might be something that Rotary International needs, is to look back at its origins as a way of going forward.
And then a comment came earlier in the chat of, thanking you for your breakdown of the four-way test. And this next comment goes right along with that. Are you willing to share any of your written thoughts that you shared today that we might be able to refer to later?
I'll tell you what, I wrote a piece on the four-way test that has been published in a few newspapers and so forth. It's only about 800 words. I will send that to you, and you can share it with the group if you like. I find that the four-way test is not just useful, it's a remarkable distillation of the four chief ways of thinking about what's right and wrong. And I think, even though the story of Herb Taylor, the story we get about Herb Taylor is he sat down at his desk in prayer and then after a few minutes wrote down these four questions. And I have no reason to question that. However, I do think it also came out of a lifetime of reflection about what's right and wrong. And so, yeah, the four-way test, I mean, as Rotarians, we like it, we find it useful, but I think it's much more than that. I think it is something that is a really reliable guide to making the most difficult decisions. And so I teach it and I use it myself all the time.
Wow, this has been inspiring. Very, very inspiring. So thank you again for your time. I do look forward to getting that email from you, and then I will get that to Mary Gask, our PR chair. Maybe we can get that posted on DACDB or some other place as a resource for our members. I think that would be tremendous. I'm going to ask you to close us down here today by reciting the Rotary four-way test.
For we test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just
We
a
look-
pleasure talking with you.
We look forward to our next conversation with Rotary Action People coming up on Friday, May 29th. Get ready, guys. Bernie's up next. Polio update coming on Friday from Mr. Bernie Rydell. Looking forward to that. Richard, thank you so much. That truly was perfect.
Great. I'm so pleased, and I just had a great time talking with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's a wrap for Conversations with Rotary Action People. Have a wonderful Wednesday.